I'm back, baby. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Circle Center Mall in Indianapolis, Indiana, completing our series in the Circle City. I'm your cruise director, Kristen, back from an unplanned hiatus, and I really hope that's the last time that happens. It sucked. I actually took some footage of this mall back in August, and through some weird quirk of my camera, when I sat down to start working on the video, most of my footage was out of focus and I had to go back a few weeks ago and reshoot. That's never happened before and I have no idea what caused it. It was cool though. My sister came with me and we had a great time getting out of the house and having an adventure. The very first thing I want to show you is this fountain, which is right inside the main entrance and is just amazing. Although, those pipes inside the frog's mouths look like they're up to something a human could never get away with inside a mall, I gotta say. This mall has a long history, going back much further than 1995 when it opened. I want to stress that this mall opened on September 8th, 1995. They began the planning process for it in, wait for it, 1978. That's right, it took 17 years to move from conception to opening, perhaps one of the longest development periods I've covered, second to maybe Pittsburgh Mills that took 20 years. This mall was originally conceived by the Simon brothers, Melvin and Herbert, alongside the mayor of Indianapolis at the time, William Hudnut. The original plan was to connect the city's two major downtown department stores, Ellis Ayres and William H. Block Company, by building a mall between them. This was in downtown Indianapolis, and unlike out in the country where you can just pave a cornfield and build a mall on it, there were a lot of buildings in the way between those two department stores, and the first item on the agenda was to begin buying those properties beginning in 1983. Obviously, this would take a lot of money, and the city's involvement meant that lawmakers, city and state officials, and the general public would need to be on board, and being on board meant that they would need to approve the astronomical amount of funds to buy all those properties. In 1984, a plan was announced to the public by Mayor Hudnut in a press conference. The following year, a model of the tentative design that included exactly where it would fit in the city's landscape was presented for feedback and approval. The firm that designed this model, Jerde Partnership, did not ultimately win the final design, so this model was quite a bit different than the final product. Simon's chief of architecture at the time was quoted as saying of the design process, "There's an unbelievable responsibility in building the Circle Center Mall in the middle of the city, in the middle of the state, in the middle of the country, but avoiding at all costs middle-brow or middle-of-the-road aesthetics." I think it's safe to say they did not end up with middle-of-the-road aesthetics. I don't recall ever having been in a mall that was this tall, 4 floors, and the scale of everything is impressive. We were here on a really sunny day, and the holographic accents on some of the glass just shimmers and casts rainbow reflections all over the floor below, and it's lovely. The entire mall uses circles as a design motif extensively, in tribute to Indianapolis's nickname as the Circle City. In 1986, an idea was floated to expand the project not only to connect Ellis Airs and Blocks, but to connect the mall to Union Station, the city's historic and newly remodeled festival marketplace. Had this plan come to fruition, the mall would have been 3.5 million square feet, which would have made it the second largest mall in the U.S., second only to the Mall of America. For perspective, the current second largest mall in the United States is the burgeoning fiasco that is the American Dream Mall in East Rutherford, New Jersey at 3 million square feet. This would have been nearly 20% larger than that, and the largest urban shopping mall in the country by a large margin. The mall, as completed, is about 730,000 square feet, which is about a quarter of the size of this proposed expanded version. (1986) was also the beginning of the city's difficulties obtaining funding for their share of the project. They were turned down by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, for a $9.5 million loan. The following year, Mayor Hudnut approached the state government to propose what amounted to an advance on future sales tax revenue that would be generated by Circle Center. Thus began a long process of debate that ended in June 1988 when the city decided to use a combination of property taxes, raiding the city's rainy day fund, and an increase in sales tax in the areas downtown. In 1986, the projected opening date for the mall was mid-1989. At the time all of this was going on, the mall's developers had no firm commitments from any retailers other than Blocks and Ellis Ayres, and the plan was to have a total of 4 department store anchors. Marshall Fields and Saks Fifth Avenue were the 2 biggest contenders for occupying those 2 remaining anchor spaces. They had not signed a lease for the mall that would be built where the buildings still remained, and many of the properties were still tied up in legal red tape due to some owners, like the Goodman family, wanting a stake in the mall in return for giving up their property. Both Blocks and Ellis Ayres were in the midst of corporate upheaval, in which Blocks was purchased by Lazarus and Ellis Ayres' parent company was acquired by May Department Stores. New owners in the 1987 recession put strain on the plans for their anchor tenancy. Ellis Ayres closed their downtown location in 1991, and Lazarus would follow suit in January 1993, leaving the as-of-yet unstarted mall project with no anchors. The anchor situation was fraught with broken plans and various department store chains failing to commit to take up residence in the mall. Altogether, there were 10 different proposed anchors that ultimately did not end up part of the final lineup, which included Ellis Ayres, Blocks, Lazarus, Dillard's, Lord & Taylor, I. Magnin, Neiman Marcus, Marshall Fields, and Jacobson's. All of these problems, combined with the massive scale of the project, caused the mall's projected opening date to be pushed back time and time again. In mid-1988, the mall's projected opening date was expected to be in 1991. 1992 was the expected completion date, reported in April 1989, but by late 1989, it had been pushed back even further to early 1993. The city elected a new mayor in 1990 who demanded Simon & Associates along with their partners to present a current design and to secure at least 2 anchors with written commitments. By September 1991, the delays had resulted in a massive canyon winding through the city where the parking garage had begun being excavated. Nordstrom would sign their lease in late 1991, the first anchor to do so. Many of the department stores that were rumored to be coming to Circle Center did so under a veil of non-committal secrecy. Their explanation was that a rumored luxury department store could cause a bidding war or cause real estate prices to skyrocket with speculation. It's also possible that in the early 90s, when we were emerging from a recession, we were mired in the Gulf War and the pace at which massive supermalls were being built nationwide had reached critical mass. It's possible they just weren't sure it was a good idea, especially for a mall that by 1991 had resulted in a big hole in the ground where Nordstrom was supposed to be opening at some point in the future. In 1992, the Limited signed a lease as a junior anchor. In February 1992, the city once again applied pressure to Simon, saying they would no longer continue working on the parking garage until a second anchor tenant was signed. In June of that year, Parisian came to the rescue, signing a lease as the second anchor tenant and satisfying the city's demands so work could begin again. By January 1993, Articles finally, after years of delays, get the projected opening date correct as 1995. The aim of the city in trying to get this mall pushed into existence has succeeded over the years. It's brought in more prosperity to the city center, and the mall is surrounded by businesses. However, as things have tended to go over the last few years, malls aren't doing so great. This one's doing better than most of the ones I cover. It's probably a little over half full, but there's no anchors open. Nordstrom exited in 2011, leaving their space vacant for 3 years until offices of the Indianapolis Star began occupying part of the space. Parisian became Carson's in 2007 when the Bon-Ton purchased them, and well, we all know what happened to the Bon-Ton and its lineup of local favorites. This location stayed open until April 2018, a few months before the entire chain closed its doors in August. As recently as 2016, this mall was recording record profits, and I want to stress, I'm not saying the sky is falling here. This place is actually doing pretty okay, especially for an urban mall that don't have a great record as a category. A few weeks ago, Simon announced they were going to be turning in their shares of the mall, which is about 15% ownership, to the group of 17 investors that own the rest of the shares and have since the beginning. The remaining owners plan to redevelop the mall and will be reviewing designs and ideas later in the year. What they plan to do with it remains to be seen. However, its proximity to the convention center and several hotels leaves a lot of possibilities. And if you were wondering why there's so many little girls in cheerleading outfits in the mall, it's because there was a tournament going on next door at the convention center, and we were here around lunchtime. This mall's future as a retail establishment is unclear. The trend in redevelopment tends to be in a more mixed-use direction, but it's hard to imagine them using this space for something that didn't involve retail in some way. I guess we'll see. Circle Center is a survivor that had to fight its way into existence, so even if it evolves, I'm sure we'll be able to walk these sun-drenched corridors for many years to come. Thank you for watching, and it is great to be back. Exciting things in store coming soon now that I'm back in action. Thank you to all our patrons for your continued patience and support. If you're interested in becoming a patron, please see the link in the description. As always, I'm your cruise director, Kristen, and this is UniComm Productions. We'll see you next time.